I will begin with apologies for absence or substitutions. I have received apologies from Sandeep, who may join remotely briefly, but otherwise he has given his apologies. And I've received apologies for lateness from Suresh, who will be with us at 7:45. Are there any other apologies? Thank you. Are there any urgent matters? No, thank you. Item 3, are there any declarations of interest? No, thank you. And are there any matters to be considered in private? Declarations of interest? No, thank you. Item 5, the minutes. Can we agree that the minutes of the meeting held on the 3rd of December 2024 are agreed as a correct record of proceedings? Thank you. So before we move on to item 6, I'm conscious that we have housing in the room. They've been with the regulator for 2 days, so we have agreed to start with you so that you can speak to us and then leave and get on with the rest of your evening. So we'll hand over to you to give us your report. So usually we'd probably take it as part of item 9 and Mike would introduce, but we. Sorry, Mike, if you don't mind using your.
Sorry, I will introduce my paper in full later. So for expediency, you guys can just, I mentioned you'd do a quick intro. So over to you.
Okay, super. Sorry for that. Thank you. So
it's online and also it's on here in this room.
Yeah, it's on. Is that okay?
Yeah, it just needs to be here.
Yeah. Okay, no worries. So if I just say a few words to start with, and then I'll hand over with regards to each of the 2 audits with limited assurance to give a bit more detail about that. So in terms of housing, we are committed to improving the housing service. We have been on quite a considerable journey for the last couple of years, and audit plays a really key function for us in terms of going in as our 3rd line of assurance and giving us those final sort of checks and balances. Within housing, it's been a significant period of change the last 3 years, going from an unregulated environment into an environment that now has multiple regulators and is very different from the one under which housing entered into the voluntary undertaking in 2022. In terms of meeting those regulatory requirements, we are adapting, and we have some significant programs in place so that we can demonstrate that we are achieving the requirements that each of those regulators requires of us. But in order to do that, we do know that we need to address the root causes across the housing service. So we've got 3 significant programs of work that are in place that these audits fit within, but that seek to put the sorry, is that, do you want me to? No. Okay. 3 significant programs that are seeking to put the foundations back into the housing service, so we don't end up back in this situation where we have audits with limited assurance. So in terms of meeting our regulatory requirements, we have got a program called Rebuilding the Housing Service, which is very much focused on demonstrating that we meet the requirements of the consumer standards, the building safety regulator, the housing ombudsman, across all of those areas. We've also got a housing integration and digital program, which is about putting in the right systems and data, aligning those, integrating those, and making sure that we've got robust data that supports the housing service, the transparency and the reporting through that, which plays into the audits that you've seen. We've also done a significant restructure across the housing service, so that's affected over 300 staff, because the important thing for us, if we're going to address the root causes and the issues that are coming up in these audits, is we need to get a skilled and competent workforce in place that is, match fit for the new regulatory environment that we're in now, which is very different, as I say, to 3 or 4 years ago. And then we've got the HRA business plan, which sits around that, and we've done significant work with that about focusing the resources into the areas of highest risk, which are the areas that you're seeing the audits have gone into within the business, to make sure that we do address these root causes and we don't end up with limited assurance in future around audits. So I think that's, I mean, I just wanted to give you a flavour of the broader context, the work that we're doing, so that when we talk about this, you've got that assurance that we understand the wider landscape and we're not just tactically looking at things in isolation. Did you want us to talk to each of the audits now?
Yes, please. Should we start with the first of the 2 limited assurance reports?
Do that. So governance and assurance framework, Chair.
Yes, the governance and insurance. Yes.
Okay, great. Excuse me. So first of all, I just wanted to say that I welcome this audit. I don't think it's ever comfortable having an audit that gives you limited assurance, but I think what it does is confirms that some of the steps we're taking to improve our governance and assurance are the right ones, and they're captured in there in the actions. So that's comforting. That shows we're on the right track and that we're taking the action that we need to deliver a high quality service. We're on track with all of the actions and the timescales contained within the audit, and there were 2 high risk actions that were noted in that. The first one was about implementing a performance management framework document. First of all, I just wanted to stress that we do have performance management framework systems and processes in place, particularly in our high risk areas like housing compliance. So we have those systems and processes in place. This is about documenting those and making sure we've got those across the whole of housing and environment. But in terms of that framework document, we have a draft that we'll be reviewing at Housing and Environment, SLT, next week, and we'll then go through a round of tweaks and changes to achieve that by the August deadline. The second high risk action in there relates to our ICT digital transformation programme that Nikki referenced a moment ago. And I just wanted to give committee some assurance around the delivery of that, because that's the deadline that is December 2026. So I just wanted to give a bit more context. That programme is actually broken down into 5 gateways, so we'll be able to show the traction and delivery against that action throughout the period. We've completed Gateway 1 on that programme, which is our discovery phase, and we're about to move into Gateway 2, which is design and build. So we're just bringing in the resources for that, and that's expected to start within the next 6 weeks. And that will have a completion of April 26. So we've got a test and build, a train and a go live, and kind of hypercare phase. The design and build stage is quite a long period of time, September to April, but we'll have a number of sprints within that where we're working with different service areas to develop their kind of to-be processes to match those to our IT system. And we'll be reporting regularly to Housing and Environment SLT through our programme board, the digital programme board, and I think on a quarterly basis to corporate SLT. So we'll be able to demonstrate our traction to the organisation and that actually we're moving towards that goal. And at this stage, whilst there is some risk with achieving the December 26 goal, we have a relatively high level of confidence that we'll make it, and we will obviously be monitoring, delivering, and reporting on that throughout the period.
Thank you, James. Are there any questions for James? Councillor Martin?
Hi, James. I mean, housing is quite a big department, so when I saw this report, I didn't quite know what the specifics were. So, for example, when you're saying that they picked up duplications and inconsistencies at the moment, what's being duplicated? What sort of things might be causing a problem?
Sorry, is this in relation to?
It says.
Oh right, yeah.
The housing IT.
Sorry, yeah. This is in our IT system. Yes. So we've got some issues with things like we've got too many systems, too many IT systems. I think we've got 27 IT systems. They aren't all integrated, and they don't talk to each other in the way that they ought to do. Because they're not integrated and they don't talk to each other, we have some duplicate records on systems and across systems, and some data inconsistency. That's what the programme is aiming to remove and to resolve and to simplify. In the meantime, what we've had to do is put in place a number of systems and processes to give us the assurance that our data is correct and that we're acting on it for today. So that includes things like pulling audit reports off the system to understand changes, going and manually cleansing duplicate records. And we've actually got a weekly board that's chaired by an assistant director where we control any changes to what we call our master data. So that's things like property records and things like that. So that's what the reference is in there. The programme will address it, but we've put in interim measures to make sure that we have assurance around our data for now and for the period until the programme is delivered.
Thanks for that. So I can understand that's quite a big task, and good luck with getting all that done. And whilst this is being sorted out, I'm sure that's what you're doing at the moment. What sort of risks might we be exposing ourselves to?
Well, I think we've put in place. I mean, there would be potentially serious risks without some of the systems that we've put in place, because the probably the highest level of risk, and Dawn will be able to talk to this a lot better than I am, would be some of the compliance things in our housing stock. It's about knowing with each of our kind of housing units, do we have kind of fire risk assessment in place? Have we done electricity checks? All of those kind of essential compliance checks. So we've got the interim infrastructure in place I've just described to you in terms of that board, in terms of audit reports and mitigations. We've also brought in some external support who check the data. And actually, when we're checking and reporting all that compliance data, we have 3 lines of assurance to be certain that we know what the risks are where, and we can act appropriately on those. So we've put a lot of work into getting those systems right in the short term because we appreciate the importance of it. So we are as confident as we can be that we are effectively mitigating those as much as we can.
Thank you. Councillor Johnson.
Sorry if this doesn't seem relevant, but have you got a shortage of staff in building control?
So building control is within the planning directorate, but we have got building safety, and Dawn could probably talk to the staffing levels. If it's building safety you're asking about rather than building control.
Well, they're sort of interlinked, aren't they?
Building control sits in planning, building safety is a team in housing.
But say, for example, if somebody tried to get this to work, if somebody contacted you about that sort of thing, would you reply, or would it be building the planning people who'd reply?
If it was about a building control matter, it would be planning.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Any further questions?
Just really to understand a bit more about the management and governance of the IT program, because you mentioned you have a delivery partner. Do you have a program management arrangement within housing which is dealing with that, and who's got overall oversight of that program? Is it yourself, a corporate director, or somebody else?
Okay, so first of all, the kind of delivery partner or the support I was talking about is actually consulting in terms of our short-term compliance reporting and having assurance over that data. In terms of the digital programme, we are currently working with Capita, who are our existing IT provider. We're doing a piece of work about what those long-term support arrangements look like with our systems. In terms of our governance, Nikki is the senior responsible officer for that, and I deputised in that role, but we report into Nikki through the programme board on a monthly basis, and then I believe we report to corporate SLT on a quarterly basis to give that wider kind of organisational view. But we also, it is a cross-cutting programme, so we have corporate IT involved in that programme board. We also have colleagues in finance involved in that programme board.
Thank you, Ellen. I have just one question. So you mentioned that you've got some milestones in place to reach the December 26 target, which is great to hear. Can you just talk to us a bit more on specifically what they are? You mentioned a couple, and if you do have dates for when you intend to meet each of them, that would also be very helpful.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So there's kind of 5 gateways. We've done the gateway 1, which is our discovery phase. We're about to enter gateway 2, which is kind of the design and build phase. So really, what that is doing, we've mapped all our processes across housing as part of the discovery phase, and I think it's 197 of those. Please don't quote me, but it's close to 200 processes. One of the challenges we've got at the moment is that the processes in our IT systems don't necessarily match the kind of the business as usual processes. So it's working through those and making sure we match those up, and we have a consistent process that works for the business and delivers what we need to. So this design and build phase between September and April 2026, we'll be working through all of those and putting those new processes in place. So that's the next kind of big gateway, April 2026, when we've done all of those processes. But what I was also trying to explain is that there'll be a number of sprints, short periods of time where we're looking at each of those processes. So if you were to come to us, say, in December 2025, we would be able to demonstrate how far through that gateway we were. Following April 2026, we would be moving on to kind of the test and build, where we're building and rolling those out and making sure they're working. Then moving on to the training of staff by next sort of July, August time. And then we'll be going live in the autumn of 2026. And we're calling that, so it's go live like hypercare, which is where we're having an enhanced level of support to the teams as they're starting to use these new systems, and then tracking the benefits from the program. So that's kind of a bit more. Is that helpful?
Yes, that's great. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you, James, for that. We'll hand over to Dawn now, if you'd like to talk to us on building safety.
Thank you, Chair. So the purpose of this audit was to give assurance around the building safety requirements and where we were in terms of an organisation as meeting those and how those had been implemented. So the findings of the audit were that we had 4 high-risk recommendations to deal with, and I'll take each of those in course. So the first finding and the recommendations were around finalising our building safety cases. So we have 28 high-rise blocks in the borough, 27 of which at this moment in time are subject to the requirements of needing a building safety case. And the process for building safety cases for submission to the building safety regulator is that they invite us to apply for the certificate to regulate the building. So we have had 2 called in already, and then we're in the process of developing all the other information for the remaining building safety cases. So at the time of the audit, the investigation found that they weren't fully completed. So we need to finalise getting all of that work done. And the work that we're doing at the moment is we've brought some new IT in that helps us collate all of the information, and it asks all the relevant questions. And then that helps us put together the building safety case report that is submitted to the building regulator when those are called in. The second high-risk action was about in reference to the backlog of remediation works that are required on a number of these buildings. So it has identified that we have a number to carry out, and that hasn't progressed in the way that it would need to have done. So the work that we're doing at the moment is in parallel with developing the information. We're progressing the procurement for both the principal designer that are needed on every single element of that remediation work, and the principal contractors who we need to deliver it. And a lot of the changes in legislation have that this is what the result is, that you can't just go into the buildings and do the work in the way that it was done previously. So it's those are the changes that the regulation brought us. The third high risk action was around the competency framework for staff and contractors. So it's recognising that we must be using staff who are qualified to make decisions and progress works, and also the use of our contractors. So we do use consultants in this area who are specialists. So there's various elements of the process that we wouldn't be equipped in-house to deal with. So we do have to go and bring in external partners to support us with that. And we also need to ensure that the contractors who will be working on the remediation works in the future, and indeed any other works in our buildings in the future, that we've carried out sufficient checks on their competency and their qualifications to be able to deliver that work to the standard that is needed. So the final recommendation was about confirming the approach that we're going to be taking moving forward in all of this. And I think this is probably the time that we need to make you aware that when we've been in contact with the building safety regulator this month, so they asked us to meet with them to discuss one of the cases that we had already submitted, which is for Rufford Tower, and they have at the meeting they indicated to us that they are considering that they will serve us with an enforcement notice so that we complete the remediation works at Rufford Tower at a timetable that we will agree with them to be delivered. So it's formalising the requirement to deliver that remediation work. We have self-referred ourselves to the regulator for social housing, and we've obviously been working with them very closely over the last 2 days, and we have discussed the matter with them, and we'll discuss it further to work with them together to come to a resolution. So that's where we are with the recommendations from the audit.
Thank you, Dawn. Yep, Councillor Johnson.
Rufford Tower is in my ward. So do you think you could let us know how that's going and update us on that? The ward councillors, which I'm one. Thank you.
Yes, we will.
That'd be helpful.
Thank you. Any further questions, Councillor Johnson? No. Councillor Martin.
So yeah, on a similar vein, I presume we're talking about all these buildings are residential properties, yeah?
Yes, so they're all the buildings that are over 18 metres high. And as I say, we've got 27 currently in the borough, and 28, 27 of which we have to have a building safety case. One of them we're not the principal accountable person for. It's a different landlord.
Okay. Might be useful for us to have a list of all of them. So my background is in estates, and so I've had situations like this for our buildings where you might commission somebody to do a safety audit. They'll come up with the recommendations and remedials of things that you have to do, and you are working your way through that. We got reports like that on each of these buildings.
We do. So we have fire risk assessments, both type 1, which are the general communal areas. We've also got we've got type 3, 4 assessments, which are more intrusive. So they will go and take samples and look at where compartmentation and cavities may be. We have external wall surveys. So they look at the fabric of the property. We have structural surveys, and as we progress through the remedial work that we do, we will build up and layer up the information that we hold in all the buildings, and that's the building safety case pulls that all together. So it looks at the age, the type of build, the type of materials that are used, and it then assesses the risk that there may be. So Morton and Rufford towers, which are the 2 towers that have been had the building safety cases. They currently, because we know that there are some risks there, we currently have a waking watch there, and the work that we're doing at the moment is to put in actions that will mitigate those risks and allow us to remove the waking watch in the fullness of time, and mean that we've mitigated for any risks for any of the residents living in those blocks. Our primary objective is to make sure that our homes, all homes in our blocks, are safe for tenants and residents to live in.
And has this all been costed?
We are in the process of costing it, and you know, we are budgeting. We've got capital budget identified for the next 3 to 5 years, and we have also signed up in the last week to the government remediation plan that is being that they are working with social landlords with, to be able to remediate buildings that have problems like this.
Okay. And of the, I think you said remaining 25, is there a sort of almost like a hierarchy of risk, that some of the buildings have got major remedials to do and some have just got minor?
So we manage risk in all of our buildings. We've identified those, and we use what's called a risk matrix, and we look at different elements. So the age of the building, the type of the building, and then all the compliance elements, so fire, electric, water, gas. We assess all of those. The number of people that live in the block, the age of the people, if we understand that residents may have vulnerabilities, and we pull that all together into a report that gives us a prioritisation list. So we know which blocks have the higher risks, which are medium, and which are lower risks. And the lower risks tend to be the newer blocks that have been built under different building regulations that have been introduced over time. So it is our older buildings that are the ones that would have more issues that we have to deal with.
Okay. And would we be in any way in a situation where we might have to say that we can't occupy the building?
So we would look to mitigate for that. You know, the last thing, that would be our very last resort, that we would have to consider decanting a property of a full block of all of its residents. So you know, every action that we take is always about reducing risk, so that we can allow residents to remain in their homes in a safe way.
So we don't think we're in that situation yet, is that right?
Not at the moment, but if we were, we would take immediate action.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Are there any further questions from councillors? No? Alan, you have a question?
One for Mike, actually. Presumably you'll be doing a follow-up on both of these audits. Is that in the schedule? When do you imagine that happening? Your answer may be that you don't necessarily want to let housing know when you'll be turning up.
I know. I mean, we're not here to trick people. We work very collaboratively, and essentially we look at the implementation dates and the high recommendations. We will follow up as they become due. Our intention is now to follow up everything after the main implementation date. So April 2026 and December 2026, we'll go back and get the evidence on everything and confirm that it's all in place. But we do intend to track high recommendations as live to make sure that they're there, and we do increasingly try and talk to management about kind of progress, rather than, so we have a tracker not only of recommendations that are overdue, we have it for up and coming, so management are reminded that stuff's there, so we don't sort of hit the date and then go, oh, we need to do something. So and I think the questions that you've had about milestones and stuff like that are important, because obviously December 2026 is a long way away, and it's what we don't want to do is get to that and see nothing. So yeah, continue to track these.
Also, Chair, we've got 3 reports under follow-up in relation to voids. It might be, you know, the relevant colleague isn't here, but it's an opportunity really just for housing colleagues to assure us that those deadlines of the September 25 will be achieved. Is the relevant colleague here? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so of the 3 actions we have worked, we've been reviewing those in fact this week, and 2 of the actions we are able to be closing down, and there's 1 remaining action that we will continue to work on and aim to have that closed as quickly as possible. That's the backlog of voids that we're working on. So we have additional resources that we are looking to address the issues, but the changes that we have made from the other actions of reviewing process and implementing change should help drive that forward.
Jen, well, we've got housing people here. They might not be able to answer this because it might not be their area, but on Broadway Living, it says on the follow-up actions, there's a target date for a group of shareholders meeting. Could you answer that, or?
No, Broadway Living sits with Peter George, so I'm not cited,
No,
unfortunately. Sorry. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Are there any further questions? No. Okay, so Dawn, can you talk a bit more on, is it Wake and Watch?
So the Wake and Watch is a 24-hour service in both blocks. So it is a manned service. So we have, they are fire wardens who will have a full presence in the block, and they walk the floors of both blocks every 20 minutes. So, and their job is to review the condition of the corridors, make sure there's nothing has gone on fire or there's no smoke to be seen. And if they were to find anything, it's their job to raise the alarm and support the evacuation of the building, whatever the evacuation strategy and plan should say. So they are an external company who are trained and to do this, and they are it's a form of assurance that the buildings are safe to remain in.
Thank you. And the 5 outstanding buildings, can you give us an update on how far along we are with those? Are any of them complete in terms of safety certificates?
So we've only been invited to apply for the 2 certificates, and we've had notification that we'll be invited to apply for a further Burley Tower, between now and the end of March 2026. So at the moment on Morton Tower, we are continuing to supply information that the Building Safety Regulator has requested, and until such times as that has been reviewed and assessed, they'll notify us then of the outcome of that.
Thank you. And just on the back of Councillor Martin's question, in terms of the hierarchy of risk of those 25 buildings, is that the order in which you will tackle those buildings?
So the 3 towers that I have mentioned would have been our first, second and third, with a higher risk. So Burley Tower is an LPS building. It's a different type of build. It's large panel system. So that is and that would be of interest to the Building Safety Regulator. They want to ensure that it's an old build type, and they would want to ensure that that it is that all of our controls and mitigations are in place to make sure it's safe.
And regarding the remaining 25?
So we'll continue to so we will commence the remediation works on those regardless of whether they're called in by the building safety regulator. They'll form part of the programme of work, and we have them listed by risk. So we'll proceed to the 4th, 5th, 6th on the list, and work through reducing the risk on each one as we go. And then in the fullness of time, the building safety regulator will invite us to apply for the certification at that time, and we will supply them again with we'll use all the information we have to create the building safety report, which we will submit to them, and that will include, if works are still ongoing, we'll supply the remediation plans that are in place with what we have achieved and what has to still be achieved, with the timetables and the deliverables around that. And then they'll use that to form their decision on whether they would award a certificate at that time.
Okay, so none of these are yet complete.
No.
Okay. Fine. And so you went through the various risks, and one of which was the competency framework for staff and suppliers. Where are we on that?
So that has already commenced. So we're appointing principal designer and principal contractors at the moment. So with the first part of that procurement has been around principal designers. So we've gone through the competency framework of the company that we're going to be using for them. They're a company that we have used in the past, and we've gone through that. We work with our colleagues in corporate health and safety and fire safety to review the competencies with us.
Great, thank you. And similar question to the one asked of James, do you have any milestones between now and April to sort of track that you'll be able to meet that target?
We do. So because we're taking this incredibly seriously, we've brought the building safety work stream into our recovery project. So every week I meet with Nikki and the chief executive, and we review the work the work stream, and we've put in place a tracker that has all the elements that we have to cover and have to be achieved, and that's being reviewed there, and that will be reported in terms of, from a governance point of view, that will be reported further at both at Nikki's SLT meetings and at corporate SLT, corporate health and safety and business board.
Yep.
Business board, yeah. So, it's very much about being open and transparent about the work that we're doing, but there is a lot of governance and a lot of overview on this now, and those milestones form part of that project work.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you very much for coming today, and we'll let you get on with the rest of your evening. Thank you. Okay, so we'll move on to item 6, which is the Treasury update. Over to you, Bridget.
Okay, good evening. This is the Treasury outturn report for the financial year 24-25. So from a governance and compliance perspective, all Treasury activities complied with the Treasury Management Code of Conduct, and liquidity was maintained throughout the year. We were able to pay all that we had to pay as they fell due. All counterparties that we lent to were within the approved list, primarily the DMO and high-rated institutions, and all treasury management activity remained within the budget. On investments, our investment levels dropped from 511 million to 417 million throughout the course of the year. So we're seeing those investments come down as capital expenditure picks up. At the end of the year, most of our investments, 344 million, was with the debt management office. We did have a small amount with Lloyds and other counterparties. Average investment return was 4.8%. That's coming down. This year we're running at about 4.1%. On borrowing, we didn't need to raise any new borrowing through the course of the year. Our borrowing level dropped slightly, largely because of some maturities of public works loan board borrowings. Our average debt rate, interest rate, stands at 3.11, which is considerably lower than we would borrow for today. So we're not externalizing any borrowing at the moment, watching to see what happens in the medium term. And total debt is well inside of our capital financing requirement, which is the total amount that we can borrow based on schemes that have already been funded by borrowing. Apart from that, I don't think there's anything I need to highlight. One of the risks that we have to point out as a council is that treasury management is making more money than it would otherwise do, because interest rates are high and our balances are quite high, but those balances are coming down. So while we might be bailing out parts of the council, that will not happen forever. So that's just one of the risks that we've highlighted in the report. Otherwise, there's nothing I need to highlight.
Thank you, Bridget. Are there any questions for Bridget? Alan?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I tell me if I'm wrong, Bridget, but I think the borrowing position was probably helped by the fact that anticipated borrowing on behalf of BL, which was in the capital programme, didn't take place. I was also going to ask about performance on investments, and I'm just looking at the table 2 on page 19 of the agenda, where it is every single month of the year there was underperformance against SONIA, against the benchmark. You know, whether you're concerned about that or whether that's part of a deliberate strategy.
That is a deliberate strategy. Our aim is really security and liquidity. That's return is not what we focus on. It's about security and liquidity, and we're lending largely to the UK government, so we're not going to sort of hit the lights out with high rates. So we will always be inside of SONIA.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure. Alan, are you finished?
Sorry, I was just going to come back
Sorry, Alan.
on that. Is SONIA the right benchmark to be using then, or should you be, or perhaps set a local benchmark at a lower level to reflect the more cautious strategy?
We could do, but that is the benchmark we've used largely. Also, we're not necessarily lending at the durations that SONIA might be lending at. But yeah, we could do, but it might just be the government rate. We'll think about that. But largely, we're not here to sort of hit the lights out as far as return is concerned. It's largely security and liquidity, and the income we'll make is the third.
Great, thank you. Did you want to come in? No? Yeah, great. Councillor Johnson.
Yes, I know Alan mentioned the Broadway Living monies, and what would happen, or have we got a plan in place for if we suddenly need to give whatever reiteration Broadway Living might have in the future? Have we got a plan about giving them money, or how is that? Is there a plan in somebody's pocket?
Is okay, Emma?
Yes, so when options are considered regarding anything across the council, the Treasury team will look at the best option that is available to us at that time, whether that be external borrowing using our cash balances or what other options are available. They will be considered against what's needed, what balance we have at the time. So once those options are considered, or if options are considered and brought to us, that is when the Treasury team will then undertake that sort of forecasted look to see where and what's the best approach to funding whatever the necessary need is at that time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bridget.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to item 7, which is statement of accounts. Over to you, Emma.
Thank you, Chair. So item 7 is the draft statement of accounts for 2024-25. The report presents the draft accounts for note and comment only, although approval at this stage isn't formally required. We do obviously consider it good practice that we present the draft accounts to you and offer any opportunity to ask questions. The key point to note is going to be point 5 and 6 regarding the accounting policies. We presented the accounting policies in December 2024, of which we have now updated these to include an update on the IFRS 16 leases arrangements. This is the new accounting arrangement that came into effect this year. And on review of the accounting policies that were presented, we have then updated, including these in the draft accounts. And the only other point to note really is that obviously we do acknowledge that the risk of accounts that have not been fully audited over the last few years. So additional internal reviews and checks have been undertaken. This is internal to the financial control team, so the technical team that help pull these accounts together for us. So we do now undertake additional management reviews and reviews internal to that, just out of that consideration that we have many years of accounts that have not been fully audited. They have been audited, but they've not been fully audited. And these will then identify any prior year adjustments that we make, but they are included in the accounts, anything that has been identified. So if anybody has any questions on the accounts, then I'll be happy to answer those.
Thank you. Any questions? Alan?
I do, inevitably. So I think as far as referring them to audit is concerned, Emma's given the assurances that due diligence has been followed in relation to the completion of the draft. So nothing more for us to do, I think, in that respect. In relation to the accounts themselves, a couple of things. Page 15 and 16 of the accounts, where the general fund outturn is set out in the narrative statement. Just wondered if there's a risk going forward around, I mean, last year it was overspends on demand-led budgets broadly met by overachievement on investment income, which we were just hearing about. All fine for 24-25, but whether there is a risk moving forwards that we carry on getting the demand, but we don't necessarily get the benefit of that ongoing investment income. And secondly, more on more of an accounting issue. Last year we had our first SEND deficit, our first DSG deficit, which is now up to 5 million. The government's extended the deadline on the override for another couple of years. So, the temptation is to, sort of say, well, it's a very small deficit with Ealing, not as big as a lot of other people have got, and we can forget about it for a couple of years. What should we be doing as a council actually to make sure that that can be dealt with when government does inevitably withdraw the override?
Emma?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so your first point, yes, we do recognise that the corporate surplus as a result of the investment income, it's not sustainable to support that sort of ongoing increase in demand-led services. So savings plans and transformation through the corporate programmes, they're being progressed to ensure that we've got that resilience in the future and that we're not reliant on those investment income. So information on that can be found on the savings programs within the budget papers or the monitoring papers, so you can track our performance on those and how well we're doing them. But we are very aware that the corporate surplus can't be relied upon, given that it is exposed to market changes and the capital programme expenditure as well. So we're monitoring that very closely. But as I said, you know, the council is undertaking those savings plans and transformation as part of corporate programmes. So we are taking steps to prevent that reliance in the future. Your second point, DSG. Yes, so you're absolutely right. We are not considered high risk as a London borough, but we do continue to work collaboratively with the schools, especially around the high needs blocks, in line with those government directives, just to try and recover deficit where and if possible. However, it's difficult to predict what the government will decide at the end of those 2 years. Obviously, we've got to extend it again or release that deficit. But at the moment, what Ealing can do, and which is what we're doing, is trying to work collaboratively with those schools under the government directive of what we should be managing at the moment and working with them, especially around that high needs block, because it's that high needs block particularly that's creating our deficit. So yes, you're right. Again, we're not as bad as other councils, but we are being proactive, even though we're not identified as a high risk council.
Thank you, Emma. Alan, do you have any further questions? Yes. No, thank you. Great. Any further questions? No, thank you. Can I ask the committee to note the recommendations?
No.
Thank you. And just to take us back a step, apologies, can we also note the recommendations for the Treasury update?
No.
Thank you. Okay, that brings us on to item 8, which is the annual governance statement. Over to you, Mike.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the one document that I bring here, well, I suppose a risk register too, which is done very much with the organisation. So it's asking them to provide the assurances and describe the framework, and I'm merely the typist in terms of pulling it together. There's guidance coming that I shouldn't be the one that's writing it, and it's like I don't. But obviously we pulled together all the relevant assurances. We have a team of us that work on this to collectively gather the views, and it ultimately goes to SLT before coming here to make sure it reflects what we feel is the realistic framework of governance. We've changed slightly this year the way that we do things, because there was a lot of debate about what is a governance issue versus what was a risk, and historically most of the things that we've put as significant governance issues are actually risk. And for example, the finance risk is actually an external pressure rather than a governance issue, obviously, but the management that we're doing around that is actually good governance rather than a governance issue. So we had a lot of debate about what is good practice in that area. We have consulted external audit. They've said they're happy with the layout, but obviously we'll hear back from them whether they feel there should be significant governance issues raised as we move to the final document. But we're very happy with the kind of challenge and the decisions we've taken about what we should raise in there. Over to you for any questions.
Thank you, Mike. Any questions for Mike? No, Alan.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, so this is a compliance issue again, isn't it? Compliance with the accounts and audit regulations. I think I mentioned last year as well that a lot of councils are using the opportunity of the AGS to have a sort of governance improvement plan within the annual governance statement, and that's an option for Ealing going forward. But I appreciate the work that's involved in that. I think in terms of the document that goes to audit, I think it would be useful just to possibly reflect on some of the issues raised elsewhere on the agenda. Recent weaknesses arising from audits of the contracts register and business continuity, which are governance issues, seems to me, which should perhaps be, cross-referenced in the annual governance statement. But finally, page 239, I would find it helpful, I think, if because it mentions significant governance issues for 24-25 and cross-references back to the section on risk. It would be useful to have that drawn out a little bit more, because I must say I found it quite difficult within the document to identify what the significant governance issues for 24-25 were. So less a question, I suppose, Chair, and more a couple of hopefully not unhelpful suggestions.
Thank you, Alan. Mike, did you want to come back? Thank you.
So thank you. We'll obviously consider those moving forwards. I think in terms of there is some new guidance around the annual governance statement and reporting, and I believe, glancing over that way, that part of that is there will be a requirement for another statement, which is a forward-looking statement on governance. I'm hoping somebody's going to help me with that work, not have to pick that one up myself. But essentially, so whilst it's not a requirement now, and we're very confident that the statement is currently compliant with that, as well as looking to other authorities for good practice when we redesign what we include in there moving forward, we're conscious that there will need to be a statement about kind of the forward look as well. So that will come as practice. In terms of the significant governance issues, I think the key word there is significant. And historically, we used to take kind of the 3 biggest risks, or 4 or 5, depending on kind of scoring, and a number of those issues that we've got within the internal audit reports wouldn't be on the risk register. And I think it's judging what that word is significant, but we will take that on board and consider moving forward for future statements, along with any challenge we get from external audit colleagues.
Thank you, Mike. Did you have any further questions, Alan? No. Thank you, Councillor Martin.
Sorry, just on a sort of similar vein now. So this is obviously a statement, so you might expect it to be relatively straightforward, and I presume there's a process that goes on before it where we do actually evaluate what we're saying. So I'm just thinking, as a school governor, we've gone through something similar. We've been sent a list of statements about ourselves, asked to confirm, by what percentage, if you like, we agree with those statements, and that's built into something which then will generate some actions. Is that the sort of process that underlies this document?
Pretty much. So we write out to all directors and strategic directors and now assistant directors to say, can you give us a positive assurance statement that your control environment, governance framework, etc., is meeting the standards. They will flag any areas where they don't think they're compliant, as well as drawing on internal audit work, and other sources of information. We refer to the regulators, external audit, etc., and we build all of those into, and we've got director of legal as the monitoring officer, we have HR, we have the section 151 officer, and the strategy lead all in the meeting to kind of discuss and pull in their areas of expertise, which is largely the kind of governance framework for the organisation. So we all have relevant parts in there to give those assurances and confirm that these elements of control are actually in place. So things like the fact that we've got this committee and the structure of this committee, etc., etc. So that's essentially the framework that does that. And we start it in kind of November, and we sit down and tear apart the last one and say, what do we need to add, what do we need to change, and that develops over up until this point.
Thank you, Mike. Any further questions? No, thank you. Okay. Can I ask the audit committee to note the recommendations? Thank you. Okay, that brings us on to item 9, which is Mike again.
Thank you, Chair. This is my usual update report, and then we've got the head of audit's opinion. Sorry, I've said opinion. It's a conclusion, which is now the new global internal audit standard requirement. To help members understand, I've given a kind of feel that the overall opinion was reasonable, but it was on the cusp because of the number of limited assurance reports. But it's difficult just numerically to just consider these things. There's a small, there's some thematic issues which are quite concerning, but they're isolated parts of the business, and the rest of the business is operating okay. So we've set out those thematic issues and discussed those with management to try and help kind of them to consider areas to improve moving forwards. As well as the annual opinion, we update in terms of the reports completed in the quarter, and we've flagged the limited assurance reports too, which are housing, which have already been nicely dissected by the committee. And there's summaries in terms of the other reports that are concluded during the period. Also, a key thing that we need to do as part of the annual opinion is give assurance on our own function. With effect from April, the new global internal audit standard came into effect. Now, prior to that, we were working to the public sector internal audit standard, and we've had previous assurance externally on that we're meeting it well. We are required to do an internal assessment to make sure that we meet the global internal audit standards, and I essentially went through and did a gap analysis, which is reported in detail. Also attached are weighted documents that basically are required as a result of the new global internal audit standards, so that we meet it and we set those out. So we've got the internal audit charter, which includes a mandate, which is the statutory requirements. That's the reason we exist. We've set out an internal audit strategy, and then there's a couple of fraud documents that we needed to update, reflecting a new fraud act as well. There's various questions for the committee to ask yourself. I know you will have considered those as you move through, and if you've got any questions or you feel that things should be changed as a result of a discussion around those things, very happy to take those on board. And finally, just the fraud report, which has some really good results. Really pleased with the team. High performance in terms of getting properties back. It's a record, I think, for us since I've been here. I'm really pleased. I'm striving for 20 in a year. We got very, very close this year, but really pleased the work that the team has done, and that's recovering properties for tenants with a genuine need. So it's really important work that's been done. I'll pause and take any questions.
Thank you, Mike. Councillor Johnson.
I should have maybe asked this while they were there, but how do we think housing got themselves into so many difficulties? Or is that not fair to ask you, but, how can we avoid that happening again?
So I think, when we had a few years where we were issuing limited assurance reports across the organisation, and the questions coming from audit committees, how can we improve them? And I think one of the things we did, so looking at the performance audit, performance governance audit that we did, so we have lines of assurance that we call it. So management should be checking balances and making sure that they're doing stuff is the first line of assurance. So they report on the stuff that they do. The second line of assurance is kind of what oversight and challenge do they do? So what QA processes do they have in place? What reporting do they have in place, etc., etc. So actually that audit speaks to, you know, how do you as a service get to know what you're doing and getting assurances that stuff's in place. So, you know, are all your safety certificates being issued? You know, are you running reports on that? Do you have a QA process to make sure that the certificate's sitting behind and you've got that evidence? So the kind of things that we come in as a third line of assurance, they're doing themselves to get those assurances. So I don't think that's always been as robust. And it's building that framework. So that audit was also designed to try and help them kind of build that, to suck those assurances out, get that information and learn and improve themselves, rather than kind of waiting for audit to come in and bayonet the wounded. So I think it's perhaps been some of those reporting things haven't been as robust in the past. So we've not been kind of proactively identifying where there's a dip in performance and then going, right, we need to address this. So I think it's kind of looking at those things, asking those questions and making sure that they can respond to emerging risks and resource appropriately.
Thank you, Mike. Councillor Martin.
So can I just ask you about a couple of the areas that we haven't talked about yet with limited assurance? So one of them is the contract register. So wasn't clear on what you were saying about that, because so I presume we've got a centralised register, everyone's supposed to submit their information on their contracts. Are we saying that they're just not filling that in, or are we saying that they're actually going off and agreeing contracts without any oversight?
So the audit was very much of the contracts register, and like, so we look at spend and then we look at the register to see if it's been recorded. It doesn't mean that there wasn't a legitimate contract and it hadn't gone through the process. It's just actually they haven't then gone back and added it to the register. And the register is obviously important because we can track things and make sure that renewals are done and challenge them and make sure they're monitoring performance. So it's a kind of central point to it. It doesn't mean that they've fundamentally gone off and bought stuff, but it's an important part of the framework. And it's reliant on managers going, right, we've done the procurement, we need to add it to the contracts register. And what a lot of this is about is actually saying, as well as doing that, we then need to do some spend analysis and go, hang on, we've spent this with this organisation, it's not on the contract register. Why is that? That will identify, I'm sure, instances where there's been more spent than they've logged on the contract register, or that somebody has done a procurement or hasn't done a procurement and should have done a procurement. So, but it's about actually reducing the basic non-compliance of not being on the register, so we can then identify those more serious non-compliance and focus on those. And things like, we have a joint contract board that challenges officers where they haven't complied, and it's about kind of reducing those numbers so we can then focus on the serious non-compliance and make sure that it's brought back into a compliance space.
Can I just, so I mean, I've been on the other end of some of this in my previous jobs, and so what can happen in this scenario is that I'm spending money on a particular thing, and somebody in another department is spending money on the same thing, and somebody else is spending it on the same thing. When you collect it all together, you realise that there were thresholds that you didn't comply with as an organisation, that those individuals might not have been aware of, but once you start collecting it together, you can see it. So is that the sort of thing that it potentially is happening? And if it is somebody ultimately responsible for managing this process to then go back to people and say, sorry, you've all got collected together and we've got to have one contract?
So essentially, that's the other part of this, is that by tracking that, they can ensure that those sort of things are picked up, and ultimately we can say, well, actually, instead of spending, I'll use small amounts of, you know, if each department is spending £100 and there's 3 departments, you've got £300. Are we getting best value for money for that £300 if we all went out? If we went out collectively as one? So procurement can offer those kind of services if they can track that and see those contracts coming.
Thank you, Mike. I mean, I can see that there's a deadline for July 25 on that one. I know we're not at the end of July, but are we on course?
We tend to follow up after the implementation date, so I can't give a categorical it's there. I do know from conversations with the relevant strategic director that it's Emily, so that she's appreciating the work that we do by putting up and coming recommendations. So she's very much aware that that's one that we're about to follow up on, and she's given me assurances that work is in train to do that. So we'll formally go in and do a bit of testing to give you the full assurance, but verbally there's work in train to get that on board.
Great, thank you. Councillor Martin.
Sorry, I forgot I wanted to ask you about some of the other ones. So the schools health and safety, which also had limited assurance. So I don't understand the process by which they are answerable to us on these. So I presume we've got somebody who inspects or connects some way with the schools to ensure that they're following correct procedures.
Individually, schools are responsible for their own health and safety. So the head teacher is the person who needs to ensure that those things are done. We as a council should get assurances from the head teachers to make sure that those things are in place. We offer service through the corporate property team for schools who they can choose to buy into, who will go out and do the flagellant health and safety checks on their behalf. So we've got that element. They don't have to buy that, so they can do their own thing. We just want to try and get assurances from the schools that that is in place, so that we know that they've done it. So it's about actually just kind of writing out to them in the same way that I think you probably referenced earlier. There's the SFVS statement that comes to governors saying we've got these framework in terms of controls. They all come into my team, so we can see that the school's done them, and we just want to get that assurance that actually the school is on top of these things and is there, because ultimately if there was a problem in the school, the council's the person who's got to find those school places and make sure that there's a safe building. So it's really just not taking away the responsibility from the head teachers, but getting some assurance from the council's perspective that that stuff is being done.
Okay, so we have limited powers really to actually insist that they do something, is that right?
In theory, I mean, what we talked about is if they're not getting that feedback, then they should be saying to the school that we as a council should look to do it, and that represents a cost. You know, ultimately you'd expect head teachers to respond and just confirm those things are in place. So I think it's just about kind of giving them a bit more of a nudge, or going out and speaking to them to say, actually, we really need this, and pushing for that, which I don't think has been as robust in the past as it could have been, because I think ultimately we really just need those assurances that stuff is in place. And it doesn't mean just because we haven't had it, it doesn't mean the school hasn't done it. It's just that we haven't confirmed it. So it's just about getting that additional level of assurance.
Okay, and just one more on that. So the other issue that's mentioned there is the school transport. I mean, I had a case as a councillor of someone who complained about one of the drivers, and they weren't a parent, they were somebody who was aware of that person and thought they weren't appropriate. And when I tried to follow it up, I was told it's the school's responsibility not the councils. I'd be interested to hear what you think of that, the answer that I got there. And whilst I kind of take the point that probably is schools, would we not what we're talking about in this, are we saying that we should be intervening more, at least trying to intervene?
My personal view is there's a reputational risk for the council if a supplier to our schools or one of the schools were to fail. I mean, if you look at Grenfell, it was actually a TMO that was responsible for managing that, and the chief executive at the time is no longer there. So we just need some kind of assurances that these things are in place. We can't go out and do everything on their behalf, but I think we should be trying to get those assurances. I think in terms of the what we identified in the passenger stuff was actually they were putting in a lot of good control. They were starting to do things like spot checks, checklists, getting those assurances. So they were seeing some of those things happening. They just hadn't embedded enough for us to be able to give assurance categorically that it was working. But I think we have an obligation, responsibility just to oversee some of those things. There are certain transports where the school might organise it separately, but you know, some of this is kind of cross-borough stuff that I think we just need to have that framework in place.
Thank you, Mike. Any further questions? Alan?
Chair, if I ask about business continuity planning, which I was planning to do anyway, we'll have covered all of the limited assurance reports. Really just a bit more on what's going wrong there. It's not necessarily that Ealing's not prepared for emergency issues that might arise, but it doesn't know because the documentation is not there, I guess. Is that what you're saying?
Seems strange turning this way to answer you. So essentially, I think there were legacy business continuity plan services had in place. As we started to audit, there was a new set of standards and paperwork. The framework was kind of there and taking shape, but the services hadn't completed them in anger. So it's very hard to give an assurance that actually it's working and in place and they've considered those things. And I think, you know, there's been a lot of changes around like potential cyber attacks and those kind of things. And everybody talks about Hackney and the fact that it took out all of their systems rather than just individual systems, which a lot of business continuity plans were originally built on. So it's about kind of the need to review and refresh. It's dependent on individual services to complete those, hence the kind of longer date, because the business continuity team have almost done their part in setting out the framework, and then you're reliant on those services responding. So inevitably you get kind of 60% response rate, and then you chase the remaining 40%, and it's a war of attrition trying to get to that final point of completing those, hence the longer date. But there was some legacy stuff in there. Some of the key stuff is very much identified, but it's about actually making sure everybody's doing their bit, have considered the priorities, and then actually sitting down and saying, actually, our priority would be to put this system up first or this area, and pulling it all together. So it's just about rebuilding that and getting those assurances that the framework's in place.
Is that your team's responsibility, or is there somebody else corporately who's following those issues up, or does it come back to you?
So I don't have responsibility for the business continuity team. That they are a separate function. I think they report into ICT because of some of the parallels that happens there. Obviously, we will go back and follow up to make sure that the controls are in place. And again, it's another ones that ultimately falls responsibility of Emily. And I think she was aware that there was a lot of work in this space during there. She did try and twist my arm to more reasonable, but there just wasn't enough work done at the time to give those framework in an independent way. Not you should change that, Mike, by the way. clearly is it's still limited. But you know, she's very conscious, and she's talking to the BCP team about making sure that those recommendations are being addressed in line with the agreed date.
Any further questions, Alan? No? Okay, thank you, Mike. Okay, that brings us on to item 10, which is, oh, I beg your pardon. Can I ask the committee to note the recommendations? Thank you. And agree the recommendations. Thank you. That brings us on to item 10, risk management, which is Mike again.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the update to the risk register. As always, it's a very live document, and I'm conscious we've got questions about the finance one from the independent member, and I think just kind of talking to that one. There was a lot of unknowns about finance that meant that we had a very high risk because we didn't know what our future funding was. About two people before, I was 2 people before the person who was going in to talk to SLT about the new finance regime and the longer term settlement. So we haven't had an opportunity to update the finance risk, but we are very conscious that that is something that will now move from the uncertainty space, which reduces the unmitigated risk, but there will still inevitably be financial pressures that we need to respond to. So that risk, I think, will reduce as it comes to committee in Q1, but it will be on there in a different format. There was a lot of conversation around the housing risk, and there'll be updates again in Q1 to update and reflect that. It was one of the risks that increased during the period from 12 to 15. And I think that reflects the fact that regulators are coming in and some of the things that you've heard earlier. The other one was just around the supplier risk and the review of BL and BLRP, and the need to get external advice to transition and mitigate potential financial losses as we move into new era. So that risk increased to reflect that, and kind of ever moving beast. These risks will continue to risk and challenge, and there was just regular. Apart from that, there was kind of regular updates to the dates and work and reflection of mitigations and action to try and ensure they remain current and reflect the latest position. Any questions?
Any questions? No? Thank you. Alan?
Yeah, just thanks for that, Mike. On the finance risk. And just the annual government statement talks about the Ofsted and CQC outcomes. Just checking that those have been picked up in the risk register, because they both were negative outcomes to some extent, weren't they?
So we had a chunked up regulatory compliance audit as a single line entry, probably about 6 months, 8 months, 9 months ago, and the changes, the Ofsted was a good outcome, so that was an improvement to the current position.
Okay.
So that separated as a risk, but they also are conscious of changing regulatory requirements, which is requiring a lot of work. So that also fitted with the update to that and separating that one out. And the adults one was very much a reflection of the CQC inspection and the need to do some works on that. And they've done some works like an LGA peer review to try and get some assurance and things around that to try and reflect that and challenge. I think we're not the only council to say they've not been entirely happy with the inspection regime in the CQC space. And I think they just wanted to get some broader assurance, so had an LGA review, but they are taking those recommendations very seriously and progressing those. But the risks very much reflect the post-inspection regime for those two.
Thank you, Mike. Can I ask the committee to note the progress on the strategic risk register? Thank you. Okay, that brings us on to item 11, and over to you, Suresh and Rajesh.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening. Thanks for accommodating my late arrival. There always seems to be a clash with this committee with other councils, but I'm here. So first of all, let me say, if it's not already been said, well done to the finance team for publishing this draft accounts by the deadline. No mean feat to get it done by the end of June, given how early it was and the late completion of the last set of accounts. And I say well done because you might have heard that 75% of councils this year met that deadline, but a not insignificant number published accounts that weren't complete. We're missing governance statements. I had a pension fund bit that was missing completely. So you produced a full set of accounts, which again, just want to kind of make sure you're aware of that. The reports you've got today obviously outline essentially how we intend to perform the audit of those accounts that have been published, including the pension fund. And I'm going to get Rajesh will just take you through the kind of key highlights. I just thought I'd head off straight away. Probably one thing that's probably on your mind, where we are with the backstop arrangements, which I'm sure you've still got the battle scars of 3 years worth of disclaimed audit opinions. I think the last time I was here, I was telling you the National Audit Office were putting together guidance to enable auditors then to carry out procedures to start rebuilding assurance. So that guidance came out early June. So the National Office finally produced that. That was in collaboration with the Financial Reporting Council, SIPFA, MHCLG and audit firms. So that is now the definitive guidance and is mandated for all audit firms to follow. It's quite complicated. Probably not a surprise given the complicated nature of local government accounts. And it does make it clear that it's more complicated the more years you've had disclaimed. Our methodology team have spent a bit of time turning that guidance into a methodology for us to follow. That came out on Friday. So myself and Rajesh have been digesting that and are currently going through that to understand what that means for you as a council. So we're not in a position yet to tell you what that means, and I'll be doing that over the course of the next 2-3 weeks, and we'll obviously sit down with Emily and Emma to discuss that. All I would say, to reiterate, is it's far more complicated to do it where you've got more than 1 year disclaimed, because essentially we might have to do work on 21, 22, 22, 23 and 23, 24 in order to get sufficient assurance that we don't need to disclaim 24, 25. So we'll do our best. We've had a discussion this morning, Emma and Rajesh and I, so I think we're both really keen to get to that position, because it's a no benefit for anybody that we have to do all this additional work. So we'll see what's the art of the possible, and we'll report back to the committee in terms of what that is. So with that, let me hand over to Rajesh just to take you through the reports.
Thanks, Suresh. Thanks, Chair. Let me start with our engagement responsibility on the audit. So we are appointed to perform the audit of the council for 31st March 2025. And we are responsible for forming and expressing an opinion on the financial statement of the council, whether they are prepared in all material respect in accordance with the Code of Practice on local authority accounting. We are also responsible to review the value for money arrangements of the council and issue our public commentary thereon. We also report to the NAO on the consistency of the council financials in their WGA submission. Coming to our approach, scope and timelines, which are given on page 328 and 329 of the pack. Our audit of financial statements will be performed in accordance with the international standards on auditing, relevant ethical and professional standards, our audit methodology, and in accordance with the Code of Practice. We follow our risk-based audit approach, and the nature, timing, and extent of our audit procedures primarily driven by the financial statement areas which, as per our professional judgment, more susceptible to the risk of material misstatement. The timelines of the audit are given on page number 329, and we have agreed these timelines with the management. We started a planning and risk assessment in March and April this year, and this month we have started our main audit field work, and we aim to complete the audit field work and testing of the in-year numbers by December 2025, and then spend a couple of weeks, as Suresh said, on the rebuilding assurance on the previous year numbers. However, as per the 2024 code, we need to issue our commentary on the value for money arrangements and our auditor's annual report by November this year, irrespective of the status of the financial statement audit, and we'll aim to issue our auditor's annual report by this date. On the group audit, Council has 3 subsidiaries, out of which the Broadway Living Limited is not material and it's not a key component, but the other 2, Greener Ealing and Broadway Living RP Limited, they have few financial statement numbers which are material from a group perspective. So we'll be involving the component auditors to perform the specified audit procedures for us, and we're in the process of drafting our group audit instructions, and we'll have a call with them and issue the instructions to them. Our materiality numbers are given on page 333 and 334 of the pack, and our financial statement materiality is 1.9% of the gross revenue expenditure, and our performance materiality is 50% of our financial statement materiality. Bit complicated topic. Yeah, so the 50% is lower end on our audit materiality range, and that is due to the 3 years disclaimed opinion issued by the statutory auditors. However, we'll continue to monitor the materiality level during the course of our audit to ensure that these are appropriate. During for the audit, we have identified 4 significant risks. 3 are pretty much standard for a local authority, which are management overhead of control, valuation of property, plant and equipment, and the valuation of net defined benefit liability. The new this year is IFRS 16, which Emma talked about earlier. So this is a new standard applicable from 1st April 2024. And the objective of this standard is to bring about transparency and consistency in the lease accounting, and all the lessee are not required to bring almost all the leases on the financial statements with a right of use of assets and a lease liability, which the council has already done in their draft financials, and they have recognized 72 million as the opening ROU in the accounts, which will be auditing during the course of audit. On the value for money, our planning risk assessment is still in progress, and we will report any significant weakness once our work is complete. However, in February this year, we reported as part of our audit compression report for March 24, 1 significant weakness, which was related to health and safety and a notice issued by the regulator of social housing. So we'll report on this significant, reassess this significant weakness as part of the March 25 audit, and then we'll report accordingly. That's all on the council audit strategy memo. We have submitted our strategy memo for the pension fund also. On the pension fund, we managed to get to rebuild assurance as part of the March 24 audit and issued a qualified opinion, and we aim to issue an unqualified opinion on the pension fund accounts if it all goes well and no major issue crop up during the audit. Two significant risks, pretty much standard. One is related to management overhead of control and valuation of level 3 investments, and one enhanced risk on the valuation of level 2 investments. And materiality level are pretty much standard. And for the pension fund, we have increased our performance materiality to 60% due to the qualified opinion. We managed to rebuild the assurance and the qualified opinion which we issued last year. So that's all the major highlights. Open to any questions, if any.
Thank you. Are there any questions?
Just to say though, that what we've heard this evening, hopefully the housing, health and safety should be all right by the end of the year, we hope.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Any question, Alan?
Yeah, well, yeah, it's all laid out there, isn't it? Good luck, and look forward to hearing from you later in the year. On the timescales for VFM, is that on the same timescale as the statement of accounts, or you'd be hoping to report a bit earlier to us on that?
So the plan is to report on the VFM by the end of November, so that's earlier than the accounts.
Thank you. Any further questions? Great, thank you. Can I ask the committee to note the report and the strategy for 24-25? Thank you. Thank you. That concludes our audit committee meeting today. Thank you everyone for attending. Thank you.